The member for Hughes.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I'm pleased to rise to speak on the Liquid Fuel Emergency Amendment Bill of 2017. Now, firstly, Deputy Speaker, the reason for this bill is the International Energy Agency places an obligation upon all their members to have a stockpile equivalent to 90 days of their imports of oil. Now, for many years since we became a member of the International Energy Agency, it's something we didn't have to worry about here in Australia. We had our Bass Strait oil on stream, and we were almost, for most of that time, either energy self-sufficient, on oil, or very close to it, Deputy Speaker. But in the year 2000, the supply of oil from Bass Strait started to dry up. And while our supply was drying up, our demand for oil in this nation was increasing. So today, we face a prospect in this nation where we are more reliant on imported oil than at any time in our nation's history. Even before the discoveries of the Bass Strait oil, we are now more reliant on oil than at any time of our history. And as for meeting our obligations under the International Energy Agency, it was estimated in April 2017 we only had 51 days worth of oil imports. 51 days equivalent worth of imports against a requirement of 90. That makes us the only member of the International Energy Agency to be in breach of those obligations. Now, the first question, Deputy Speaker, is how relevant is that 90 days? 91 days doesn't make you secure. 89 days doesn't make you insecure. It's an arbitrary line about where it is. So as well as an international obligation, we also need to be looking as for Australia's national interest. What level of oil do we need in the country, a reserve holding and stocks that could get us through a crisis, Deputy Speaker? Now, in relation to that, I note that the Australian Institute of Petroleum has argued that that 90-day requirement should be reviewed, considering it was set back in 1974, and that global oil markets have evolved sufficiently in that time. The Australian Institute of Petroleum has questioned the logic of investing in oil stock holdings, suggesting, and I quote, "There is no evidence that the substantial cost of emergency stockpile is justified on energy grounds, noting that Australian fuel supplies have not been disrupted even during global supply disruptions." Similarly, Caltex has argued that increasing Australia's oil stocks to 90 days of net imports would make, quote, "very little difference to Australia's fuel security," and suggested that the high cost of investing in a strategic fuel reserve would need to be met either by increased fuel prices or diversion of public funds. So, Deputy Speaker, there would be a very, very significant cost to this economy, to this nation, if we were to meet that 90-day requirement with physical stocks of oil in this country. So effectively, by going down the mechanism of purchasing tickets, we are running the gauntlet on our nation's national security of ensuring that we have enough liquid fuel in this nation. In contrary, Deputy Speaker, we look what they have done in the USA. It wasn't that long ago, Deputy Speaker, that in the USA the term of peak oil and their concerns and their reliance on imported oil from the Middle East was a major political issue in the USA. In fact, it was President Obama, Deputy Speaker, that said we can't drill our way out of oil, while others, Deputy Speaker, said drill, baby, drill. And thankfully, Deputy Speaker, that is what the USA did. They developed new techniques of drilling. And I'd like to quote, Deputy Speaker, about I think this is a very significant quote. It's from Alan Glimmer, the co-founder and executive chairman of Drilling Info. And he said of the new discoveries of oil in the Permian Basin in West Texas, he said, and this sort of seems almost contradictory, we should view the Permian Basin as a permanent resource. That's a permanent resource of oil. The Permian is best viewed as near infinite resource. We will never produce the last drop of economic oil from the basin. That's what the situation in the States, Deputy Speaker. But here in Australia, we have Labor and the Greens wanting to stop oil exploration at every possibility. We have members of Labor Party here in this debate, Deputy Speaker, talk about how they are concerned about oil security in this nation, and yet their state colleagues, Deputy Speaker, they block at every opportunity they seek to block with their Green mates oil exploration and gas exploration in this country. Well, that puts our nation, Deputy Speaker, at a significant risk, and it imposes a significant cost to the economy. And then, Deputy Speaker, we have the amendment moved by the hapless member for Port Adelaide, a shadow minister for energy. And I'd just like to read part of his ill-considered amendment to the House. He said, the government's lack of national energy policy is causing an investment strike in new electricity generation. Deputy Speaker, this just shows how completely out of touch the shadow minister for energy is. There is no investment strike. There is billions and billions of dollars. I estimate, Deputy Speaker, on the back of an envelope, around $7 billion worth of investment in new generation facilities, in wind turbines and Chinese solar panels. There's no investment strike in those, Deputy Speaker. But the problem that we have is that those sources of energy generation are intermittent and they're unreliable. So whatever we have, whatever investment we have, Deputy Speaker, we must have it backed up, and backed up 99.9%. If not 100%, we have to have it backed up by dispatchable power. And what are the Labor Party doing, Deputy Speaker? They say they want to close all the coal-fired power stations down in this nation. We don't have enough dispatchable power in the marketplace at the moment, and the Labor Party want to close, with their friends the Greens, want to close the rest of the coal-fired power stations down in this nation. How are we going to get the electricity to run this economy? It's not only, Deputy Speaker, it's liquid fuel that we should be concerned about the security of this nation. It is also electricity that we should be concerned about in this nation. Because without electricity, you cannot run your hospitals, you cannot run your public transport systems, you cannot run your lifts to high-rise buildings. This economy grinds to a halt if we cannot continue to supply it with enough electricity. And what do the Labor Party do? They want to invest this nation's precious capital in building more intermittent and unreliable sources of electricity generation. We've seen, Deputy Speaker, that the cost of the renewable energy target and federal schemes, a $60 billion subsidy. By 2030, a $60 billion subsidy, and that is only the federal subsidy. On top of that, you have to add the state subsidies, Deputy Speaker, which even the Grattan Institute has estimated an additional $14 billion subsidy. Simply a reverse Robin Hood, taking from the poor and giving to rich green people, Deputy Speaker. $14 billion worth of subsidy. And then you have the hidden subsidies. The costs of hooking all these additional wind turbines and solar panels up to the grid. Billions of dollars of more cost onto the economy. And then, Deputy Speaker, there's the cost of what it does to the distortions to the market. Because when you force intermittent and unreliable electricity generation into the grid, the more that you put in, the higher costs that you have, because you have to back it all up 100%, Deputy Speaker. That is why, Deputy Speaker, the Prime Minister is correct to look at projects like the Snowy Hydro scheme 2.0, because you have to back it up. So, Deputy Speaker, we have a crisis in this nation. We have a crisis in the nation, firstly with our liquid fuel, with our greater reliance on imports. We have a crisis in this nation on electricity generation. And the third place, Deputy Speaker, which is also mentioned in the member's amendment, is talk about the government's failure to ensure adequate and affordable gas supply. Well, Deputy Speaker, whose fault was that? It was the state Labor government of Queensland and the Rudd-Gillard government that were warned, clearly warned, that if they went down the track of opening up all the gas exports without putting steps in place to ensure that we had sufficient supply in Australia, that gas prices would skyrocket. And that is exactly what happened. So we have three issues, Deputy Speaker, putting the energy requirements of this nation at risk, all by the Labor Party. And as for the member for Port Adelaide's motion about the investment strike in new generation, the simple reason there is investment strike in dispatchable power, be it coal or be it gas, is because, Deputy Speaker, anyone that invests in a new coal-fired electricity generation plant knows that they need a commercial return over at least 30 years. And they know, Deputy Speaker, that in that time there is a grave risk of a mad, left-wing, Green Labor government taking control of policy in this country and pulling the rug out from underneath them. So that is why there is an investment strike, Deputy Speaker. We need to do better. We need, Deputy Speaker, to acknowledge that the cost of energy is one of the most important things that drives wealth creation and prosperity in this nation. You combine that with human ingenuity, risk-taking, Deputy Speaker, it is low-cost energy that is the force multiplier that creates wealth. If we want to fund all the social programs that we all talk about in this parliament, from continuing to fund the National Disability Insurance Scheme at a cost of $22 billion a year, if we want to fund our healthcare, our hospitals, our schools, our roads, our public transport, our aged care, our pensions, if we want to fund all those things, Deputy Speaker, we must have low-cost energy in this country. And yet every single policy lever that Labor can put their hands on, Deputy Speaker, pushes up the price of electricity to Australian consumers. Deputy Speaker, we need to get drilling. We need to understand that the oil capacity development that we have in this country has fallen off the edge of a cliff. We need to ensure that we get our gas drilling again. We hope that the Labor members from Victoria would talk to their state counterparts and talk to them about the nonsense of pursuing a 40% or 50% state renewable energy target, would talk to them about the dangers to the economy of locking up all their gas supplies. But, Deputy Speaker, we don't hear a beep from them. All we hear, Deputy Speaker, is that they want to go down the track and pursue not the Paris targets that the government's agreed to of a 26 to 28% cut. They want to pursue a 40% cut. So I would like a member of the Labor Party to explain to me how we are going to get a cut of 40% in our liquid fuels. You may very want a 50% renewable energy target in electricity. What are you going to do to liquid fuels? How are you going to get that cut of 40% in this nation's liquid fuels? How are you going to get in aviation? How are you going to get in trucking?
Order. The debate is interrupted in accordance with Standing Order 43. The debate may be resumed at a later hour.